the director from New Zealand. And would you welcome Reverend Ros Goldsborough? Welcome along, Ros. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. And what a beautiful, moving song that was. Yeah. Just seeing the way they had made those clouds come into angels. It reminded me that someone took a photo over Unity Village one time, and the cloud was like this huge angel was spread out over the village. It was quite stunning. I presume what we were seeing in that clip was manipulated, but still it was extremely beautiful. Thank you. So why frogs matter? I came up with this because as most of you know, moved into this eco village and loving it. And one of the things at one of the meetings, that we have a pond in the village, and there was great jubilation that the frogs were back. It was like, okay, the frogs are back. What did that mean? And it was about the health of the pond. It meant that the water in there was very healthy. It was sustaining good life. And it made me think about this wonderful story I heard years ago of a woman in hospital, and she was very ill, and she had a chaplain came and visited her, and remarkably, the next day she was so much better. A friend of hers was visiting and said, you're so much better. What's happened? She said, well, I had this beautiful chaplain visit me last night, young woman with long blonde hair, and she left me this little, and you can't see it very well, so I'll give you a bigger version. She left me this little ceramic frog, and it had a little scroll. When I unwrapped the scroll, it said, "Fully rely on God." Frog. And she said somehow that just got into my whole being, and I slept well, and I feel so much better today. And her friend was going, well, I must meet this chaplain. This is amazing. How wonderful. So I started to ask the hospital authorities about where could she find this chaplain described to her. And the hospital authorities are saying, well, actually, all our chaplains are old. None of them fit that description of a young woman with blonde hair. Who knows where she came from? But I just love that whole idea that we could bless someone by giving them a little ceramic frog. Fully rely on God. And so I was thinking about this whole idea. So what does it mean to fully rely on God? It's not that old way of thinking that we might have had. Well, I certainly had in the past, which was that there was some being out there that was kind of keeping an eye on me and making some judgments, seeing what I was doing. So it's not that in our understanding and the teaching that we have in Unity. It's about principle, isn't it? It's law, it's spirit. But none of those make a very good acronym, do we? Fully rely on spirit, FROS, that doesn't work so well. Fully rely on law, FROL. Anyway, I think we should stick with frog, fully rely on God. But let's think about this a bit more. What does it really mean to fully rely on principle? See, when you think about, I've heard it said that God is like the same sort of principle as gravity. Well, think about gravity. We fully rely on gravity, don't we? We have no problem with this. None of us, well, I don't think anyone here would think about walking out of a second-story building and just thinking we could float down to the ground. We'll plummet. if we asked an architect to design us a new house and we got the drawings and we're very excited and it's got 2 floors, but no stairs, we're going to go back to the architect and say, where are the stairs? And he's going, oh, here's another one who doesn't know how to control gravity. Huh. It's not like that, is it? Because we can't control gravity unless we're up in the spaceship and whatever. We are bound by it and we fully rely on it. We don't question it. We're down under. We're called, people in the rest of the world say we're down under. We call ourselves down under. Well, it doesn't mean we're hanging upside down, I don't think. It doesn't mean that we might fall off at some stage because we're on the underside, does it? So somehow we fully rely on this gravity. Can we apply the same reliance on God, on principle? And I think this is our big challenge, because if we are going through life thinking that we have to be the ones in charge doing everything, are we really fully relying on this principle? I'm reminded of the story of a young man who was courting this man's daughter. So he goes to the father and says, so, I want to marry your daughter. And the father says, well, young man, what can you offer my daughter? And the young guy says, well, I'm studying the Torah. And father says, yes, but how will you provide? How will you provide a kind of home that my daughter is used to? And the young man says, well, I'm studying and God will provide. And father says, yes, but how will you make sure that, if you have children, how will you provide for the children? And the young man says, oh, well, I will continue to study and God will provide. And for every question that this concerned father asked of the young man, he got the same response, that God would provide. At the end of the evening, when the father was getting ready to go to bed, talking to his wife about the conversation he had had with the young man, and his wife said, well, how did it go? And he said, well, yeah, fine, except that I think this young man believes I am God. Who's going to be providing? And, sometimes I think we have this notion that somehow this idea was that, well, if I just sit back here, God will provide. And, there's part of me that loves that whole notion. And I know that I've used it myself. Well, God will provide. But what's my part in it? How do I see? Principle has to be used. And it almost sounds sacrilegious, doesn't it, when we think about, if I say to you, you have to use God. Because we usually think it's the other way around. God's going to use us. We go, how do you want to use me, God? What's your will for me, and all that stuff. What if it's around, how are we to use God? How are we to use this principle? See, it's a principle of benevolence. It's a principle of love. It's a principle that when we apply it, we can have, as Richard Medici was singing, you can become what you realize. We can be those angels. We can live the kind of life that we want to, but we have to use that principle. When we get a list of numbers and we have to do something with them, those of us who have to deal with the finances, Wayne, I know you deal with the finances. When we get a list of numbers and we look at it, there's a principle about how we add them up, right? It's not just random. We don't just grab one number here and another one there and put it together and hope that's it. We apply a principle. to make it work. So it's the same thing here, I believe, is that we have to apply this principle in our lives. It's like we are the CEO of our life. We're the chief executive officer of our life. What do we want it to look like? What do we want it to be? It can even be in the area of what do we want to have. All these things, all this way of being, we need to actually picture it. See, so what is it? And then, and these are, I'll come to, I want to quote Myrtle here because she says that we have, just a moment while I find the quote. She says, do not try to do too much. Leave something. This is from How to Let God Help You, page 156, if anyone wants to look it up. Do not try to do too much. Leave something for God to do. This is a funny way of talking about principle, isn't it? And further down on the same page, she writes, so learn to relax and let go all tense, anxious, personal striving. Take life easier and let divine ideas work for you. But we're the ones who have to say, well, what are these divine ideas that we want to see coming forth into our lives? So if we're the CEO, maybe God is like our chief operating officer. We have at our disposal an ever-present, all-powerful, all-wise, eternal energy. It's at work even when we sleep, isn't it? Keeps the body functioning, heart beating, lungs working, digesting, cells renewing. So how come on awakening we think we have to do it all? I want to share with you a parable. So this is a parable of Felix the flying frog. Has anyone heard about Felix the flying frog? No? Okay. So there was a man called Clarence who had a pet frog called Felix. Clarence lived a modestly comfortable existence on what he earned working at the local store. But he always dreamed of being rich. Felix, he exclaimed one day, we're going to be rich. I'm going to teach you how to fly. Felix, of course, the frog, was terrified at the prospect. I can't fly, you idiot. I'm a frog, not a canary. Clarence, disappointed at the initial reaction, told Felix, that negative attitude of yours could be a real problem. I'm sending you to a class. So Felix went to a 3-day class and learned about problem solving, time management, effective communication, nothing about flying. On the first day of flying lessons, Clarence could barely control his excitement, and Felix could barely control his bladder. Clarence explained that their apartment had 15 floors, and each day Felix would jump out a window, starting with the first floor, eventually getting to the top floor. After each jump, Felix would analyze how well he flew, isolate on the most effective flying techniques, and implement the improved process for the next flight. By the time they reached the top floor, Felix would surely be able to fly. Felix pleaded for his life, but it fell on deaf ears. He just doesn't understand how important it is, thought Clarence. But I won't let naysayers get in my way. So with that, Clarence opened the window and threw Felix out. He landed with a thud. The next day, poised for his second flying lesson, Felix again begged not to be thrown out the window. That Clarence opened his pocket guide to managing more effectively and showed Felix the part about how one must always expect resistance when implementing new programs. That sound familiar? And with that, he threw Felix out the window, thud. On the third day at the third floor, Felix tried a different ploy, installing. He asked for a delay in the project until further better weather would make flying conditions more favorable. But Clarence was ready for him. He produced a timeline and pointed to the third milestone and asked, Don't want to slip the schedule, do you? From his training, Felix knew that not jumping today would mean he would have to jump twice tomorrow. So he just said, okay, let's go. And out the window he went. Now, this is not to say that Felix wasn't trying his best. On the fifth day, he flapped his feet madly in a vain attempt to fly. On the sixth day, he tied a small red cape around his neck and tried to think Superman thoughts. But try as he might, he couldn't fly. By the seventh day, Felix, accepting his fate, no longer begged for mercy. He simply looked at Clarence and said, "You know, you're killing me, don't you?" Clarence pointed out that Felix's performance was so far had been less than exemplary, failing to meet any of the milestone goals he had set for him. With that, Felix said quietly, "Shut up," and opened the window, and he leapt out, taking careful aim on the large, jagged rock by the corner of the building. And Felix went to that great lily pad in the sky. Clarence was extremely upset, as his project had failed to meet a single goal that he had set out to accomplish. Felix had not only failed to fly, he didn't even learn how to steer his flight as he fell like a sack of cement, nor did he improve his productivity, when Clarence had told him to fall smarter, not harder. The only thing left for Clarence to do was to analyze the process and try to determine where it had gone wrong. After much thought, Clarence smiled and said, "Next time, I'm getting a smarter frog." So I wonder if we sometimes do this. We've done all our prayers, we've done all our affirmations, we've done all our denials, and still somehow we're not living the life that we really wanted to live. We've set the goals, we've pursued them. Somewhere in this, there's this balance, isn't there, of using the principle and embodying that whole way of just relaxing into being who we came here to be. Not trying to make things all different, not trying to force an issue. I really like this. It's a poem that, well, not a poem, I suppose. It was some thoughts that Charles Lawton wrote after his visit to Chartres Cathedral in France. I'm going to share this with you. We'll see if I can share screen. Yeah, there we go. Oh, you can see my, can you see that? Yeah. "I do not believe in evil. I believe in good. I do not believe in sin. I believe in truth. I do not believe in want. I believe in abundance. I do not believe in death. I believe in life. I do not believe in ignorance. I believe in intelligence. There are no discords in my being. Being is peace. My faith, understanding, and love are becoming one. What therefore God hath joined together, let no man put asunder." Let's take that into a time of meditation. I invite you to just sit quietly with your eyes closed or your gaze just softened, and relax. Just see what your hands are doing. If they're in your lap, make sure they're unclenched. Let go of any tension. Relax. I say to yourself, be still and know that I am God. fully rely on that presence. God is with you right now. Right now, you are in the presence. Right now, God's love enfolds you. Right now, God's peace surrounds you. Be still. Say to yourself, relax and let go. Now, if you're holding any idea that you are sick or poor or not good enough or not brave enough or somehow less than the magnificence of who you really are, deny power to that idea, thought, or belief. Say to yourself, this sickness, situation, belief has no power over me. Now you're ready to be renewed. There is only the life of God flowing freely through you from the top of your head to the soles of your feet, cleansing, purifying, healing, vitalizing, renewing, and restoring you. Now allow that to permeate your whole being in the silence, in the silence. Feel a welling up of thankfulness in your heart as you let go of the little self, the petty life and ways, to the larger will and the happier ways of spirit. As we say together, thank you, God. And so it is. Amen. And so it is. Fully rely on God.
Thank you, Ros. Would you thank Ros for that beautiful, beautiful meditation? Let's just keep the energy